that.
Oh, you do? Yeah. So that's,
You know, the freeway's probably one of these
I always told
that,
myself, no one, I never do.
especially at this time of night, it's probably gonna be a lot of crash.
All right, cameras on, man.
all right. So here, I'd like to call the Community Business Relations Committee to order.
Good luck.
6:07.
No documentation ever.
I believe
Last
Tuesday
morning
morning
after we
played, but we'll go ahead and get started because we do have some staff here. I want to hold you. The first item on our agenda is to consider legislation that prohibits e-cigarettes and smoking in public parks and at water tower. And I am going to, Tyler, do you know what page of the packet, the electronic packet this is on, just so I can?
Yeah, it starts on page 14.
Okay.
Hey, you guys.
Elizabeth, do you mind,
Maybe going into the other one. Oh, yeah, no, it's okay. We can talk about this later. You later, but I'll make it a, do you remember?
Yeah, page 14 it starts.
thank you.
Yep.
So I will open it up and say, wow, you've done a lot of work between our last meeting and tonight, and I really, really appreciate that. And I am always impressed with your ability to seek out the groups that might be related, and I had no idea that these groups existed.
Yep.
So, so here we are tonight it's back before us, and I will hand it over to Director Christensen, or is that your right title? No. Officer?
Directors.
Directors, okay. To summarize what's in the memo.
Sure. Yeah, so obviously the memo gives a long history of why we're here today to talk about smoke-free beaches and parks. And at our last meeting, we kind of went through that. So in the interest of time, if you don't mind, I'll kind of jump to the end.
Please.
So at our last meeting, it was recommended or requested of me to go ahead and put together an education plan with a concern about making sure that the public was aware of changes such as this. So I put forth an education plan that both educates the public through kind of traditional media and social media venues, as well as a press release that would go out more broadly. But then I also included some outreach specifically to the African American Tobacco Network, of which I consulted for this as well, so that there could be some direct outreach to some of the groups that may be of concern to others. Also put out an outreach component of the library display as a way to, again, reach people that may be not traditionally receiving some of the other press and media. And then talking about implementation and enforcement discussions, both in terms of meetings in the springtime as well as evaluating after the beach season to see how it went. In my discussions with both the City of Milwaukee's Tobacco Coalition lead as well as the Lorraine Latham from the African American Tobacco Network, they offered a couple of additional suggestions in terms of concerns that they had worked on with other communities, and that's what's in this memo today for our discussion, and whether you would want those concerns included in my communication plan as well. Specifically, there's two parts of that around enforcement and education. Lieutenant Liebenthal can talk about enforcement, but around the area of policing in terms of getting their perspective on the fines, because that was one of the concerns brought up, and then additional education that may or may not be needed specifically with the police department. And then in terms of other education, one of the things that the City of Milwaukee has done, which I again put in here for your consideration, is a way to give feedback to, in this case, the North Shore Health Department would be one of those places that the feedback is received about the implementation and potential concerns amongst beach and park goers about the implementation of this ordinance and the equity around the enforcement of any citations or community grievances around profiling. So that's what's here for your consideration. I'll leave the enforcement discussion if Lieutenant Liebenthal wanted to talk about that, but that's kind of what I put forth in terms of more comprehensive rollout plan for this type of ordinance, should you choose to move it forward. Are there questions that I can answer directly?
Well, maybe, welcome Trustee Warren. I'm sure you were held up due to the weather and the bad roads and everything. We haven't gotten very far. We've just had Director Christensen summarize what she added to the memo in terms of feedback that she got from the different stakeholders that she reached out to.
No, thanks for bringing me up to speed, and my apologies for being late. I was held up by the roads, but.
Well, we're glad you're here safe and sound, because it's not easy to do. So I just want to give you a moment to get caught up.
Get settled.
Um,
Okay.
And I guess if you have any questions that you had noted, or trustee Bachhorst, if you have any questions that you had noted in preparation for the meeting, I do have one, but do you want me to go first?
Yeah.
Yeah. It occurred to me that perhaps we could make this, rather than adopting an ordinance that implies enforcement of the police department, maybe it could be adopted as a beach rule. And that, in that way, it's posted no smoking except in the, areas like right near the trash cans, or we could get those receptacles or whatnot. And then in that way, it is not, no one's breaking a law. And so it doesn't tax, enforcement capabilities where there are other things. And then we don't have to worry about people being impacted unfairly. So that was just something that I wanted to put out to the group. And then if it didn't get, the response that we were looking for, then we could always look at an ordinance in the future.
So is the current proposal, sorry,
Mhm.
to recognize. So is the current proposal to have it be part of the ordinance, but then have a kind of a $0 fine amount? It's more of kind of a corrective action type?
So in terms of the ordinance, I think the enforcement is really up to the board to determine what they want in terms of whether it's zero fine or the fine is $100 as it is currently. The ordinance is to expand what is currently in place to include beaches and parkland.
So we would have to, okay.
Yeah.
So we would have to take down the fine if we wanted
Correct.
to. Or, I kind of like the idea of having it as a beach rule. I don't know exactly how to accomplish that administratively.
Well, it's interesting because Hubbard Park is already sort of operating that way because of the lodge. There are designated areas for smoking. So because there's that precedent, it seems like, we could offer that in the other park areas as well, including the beach. And then it's sort of more just keeping it consistent between the park areas rather than, because we would still have a carve out for the Hubbard Park Lodge, customers.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of, functionally, that kind of works the same way as what I was thinking, which is, ordinance with zero fine, and more focused on correcting the action when it comes up.
Right, and I would still say doing the education and communication plan, because it is a health issue, you know what I mean? So it still is, we can still try to, for me, that making it a rule with that type of education and plan and outreach kind of addresses people's concerns and doesn't go too far or set up an inconsistency because we are leaving, we all agreed that removing it altogether and impacting Hubbard Park and their events, we didn't want to do that. So that seems more consistent to me. But maybe this is a good time for the lieutenant to step forward and talk about enforcement, if we were to go with an ordinance.
Okay, thank you. So in regards to the enforcement and the things, I know that the question that came up about doing some training with the police department, I can inform you all that we have already gone through a fair and impartial policing training. Not too long in the past here, all of our staff are up to date and all that, so that's something that I don't think that we would need to go back and do again. So relatively recent here. In terms of the enforcement end, one of the things that the chief and I had talked about was the park rule versus the ordinance, because with the ordinance, we would have to come do the enforcement end on that. With the park rule, that is something that we wouldn't necessarily have to get called for unless someone wasn't complying with requests of staff that were there, like the lifeguards or whatnot. If we are called to such an infraction of smoking on the beach, for example, we envision it very similar to how we get called for a lot of the other things that take place over there, like dogs on the beach, or grilling on the beach, or alcohol on the beach, whatever the case may be. We go down, we inform the individual of the ordinance because they may not be aware of it. And as long as they are going and complying with everything, our interaction at that point ends. We don't necessarily write citations, we don't necessarily arrest people if they're being cooperative, and it was strictly just something where they just needed to be educated about the ordinance that did exist. If we have multiple contacts with the same people, if we have people who are very non-compliant with requests and getting belligerent and things like that, then of course we take a different avenue at that point. But it's not something that we would regularly go out and seek out all the time. We do random patrols through the parks, we do random patrols through the beach area, and if we do see it, we do address it, but we address it in the manner of, hey, you may not be aware, but this is against the village ordinance. We're gonna have to ask you to stop doing whatever it might be. And as long as they're complying, our interaction ends at that point. In terms of the fine angle, one of the things the chief and I had talked about, if we're gonna do anything with an ordinance, with an enforcement action built into that, a low-level fine would be appropriate in that regard. I know one of the things that in my interactions with the Human Relations Commission, I've had a lot of discussions with some of the members of that, where if we have an interaction with somebody and they get nothing given to them at the end of our interaction, a lot of times they wonder, well, why exactly did that take place? So if we have to have that type of interaction, and it gets to the point where we're going to take some enforcement action, it would be beneficial if we had something that we could handle it. But otherwise, it would probably be best served as a park rule, I would think. Because again, it would limit the amount of times that we would have to come over there to get involved in the situation unless they are not being compliant with the people on site.
So if it were a beach rule and you weren't receiving compliance, how would enforcement proceed?
It would hinge on how the interaction is taking place. I mean, if it's something like this where they have now asked that the person leaves and they are not being cooperative with the request that they leave, now we're getting into a situation where it's more like a disorderly conduct type thing, where we're going to have to pursue that avenue versus a voluntary compliance.
And if we had, the Surf Atwater people had offered to purchase the receptacles, and so if we had one receptacle and people could be directed there, then that removes, obviously first choice is that people don't smoke, but if they are going to, and it's near one receptacle, then at least people can be directed, and it can be self-enforced, because, one of the trends in, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like in one of the trends in community policing is that we've kind of lost the ability to talk to each other and just share space. And so we're so quick to call in a public service, authority figure. And I just think that, again, if we can avoid setting up another opportunity for that, then we're kind of going with best practice. Because most communities are talking about how do we keep police out and share the space together, and so here we are going the opposite direction. Or something that I think is, I acknowledge it, but again, it's beach season, which is not very long, and I haven't heard about it in, so we would be going with, currently people can smoke in the parks, correct? But I haven't, so have we had complaints of people smoking up on the upper level of Atwater? I guess that would be my preference.
So just to kind of, sorry.
No, please.
Sorry, so just to kind of boil it down, are we talking about basically, are both park, it would be a park rule for both parkland and the beach? That there's no smoking, but it would not be an ordinance, and all this would exclude the leased premises from Upper Park Lodge.
I do have one question about the way the ordinance currently is read. It says excluding parkland for places where smoking is not permitted.
Okay.
So I believe that some kind of ordinance change would need to be done by removing that phrase.
You're right, we would have to strike that and then refer back to the park rule, because then that
Right.
would conflict with the park rule if we don't change it. So we'll have to change the ordinance, just,
Right.
we won't put this in the ordinance.
Yeah, I guess somebody will have to track that for me, because I'm not quite sure what the domino effect of what we're discussing is. Basically, what I want to see is, I don't want to grant a special privilege for designated areas in Hubbard Park that aren't available to the rest of in the rest of the park areas that we have. So however that makes, so what I'm envisioning is, we can have a policy that says no smoking except in designated areas. We can create those designated areas in all parks, and then that way it's consistent. We can, residents can, beachgoers, park goers can say to each other, do you mind smoking in that area instead of here, and we don't have to have the police involved.
So Hubbard Park is pretty much current state under that.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right.
So then we'd be creating a smoking area at the beach, is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Would we create a smoking area at the beach or at the park, the kind of the park, Hubbard Park?
If the concern is at the beach level, then I would say put it at the beach level. And that it would be one, where I go in the summer, there's one receptacle near the trash area. And they're pretty inconspicuous. And so that's what I would recommend. Any other comments, thoughts?
Still believe in the personal freedoms of individuals, but whatever you guys decide, I'll go with.
I think this is a good compromise, and we retain current state for Hubbard Park, and however we create a smoking area. We ban smoking, but create a smoking area to accommodate those people who smoke. Create a park rule, so we're not overburdening the police force with enforcement. I think this sounds like a good solution to make.
And then for future boards, if there's an ongoing concern, then we will address it at that time. Or a future board, won't be me.
Just a point of clarification, so we're talking about the beach only, not the upper, to trustee Warren's point, not the upper level of Atwater, and they're just doing the designated area of the beach. Is that
And no
right?
smoking at all above.
Well, that's what I'm not, no, so I guess what I would say, if there's, for instance, at Hubbard Park right now, there's a designated area. And we don't have a designated area anywhere else.
But that's only designated because it's rented by the individual organization that's serving the food and having like the rest of Hubbard Park, you can smoke wherever you want. It's designated within the,
So between the River Club and Hubbard Park Lodge,
Yeah.
and that area between, which is actually noted on the map, but that's considered the leased premise. So the area
So it's
down,
private.
right,
Oh,
so
okay.
the area where Summer Sounds, is located, would fall with under that leased premise area.
So smoking would be permitted in that area. So this would be.
And right now, it's not permitted
It would be,
in the parks.
yeah. It's not
It's
an
allowed.
ordinance, yeah.
It is allowed.
Current
Okay.
state is it's allowed.
So,
Okay.
so it would be funneling people to smoke up towards the least, the smoking area in the least area. If that makes sense. The
Yes.
smoking section in the least area.
If you were intending, that's I guess the part I wanted to clarify.
Right.
I was
Yeah.
hearing like two different scenarios. One scenario was create a beach rule for no smoking, except at a designated area that would be agreed to on the beach, and then provide a receptacle. The other scenario, which I thought I was hearing, was the option to create designated areas in all of our park and beach areas for people to smoke.
I mean, I think if we're gonna go with a designated area in one place, we probably wanna go with it in all. We probably wanna create a designated area in the beach and the parks. I don't think we wanna do it in one place and not for other places. I mean, it just seems like you want consistency there.
why don't we designate areas that are non-smoking instead of carving out smoking
Yeah,
areas?
I feel like that's a better message.
Yeah. I mean, I don't
How
know
would
that,
that
how, I don't know what that would look like.
Yeah. I understand the concern around the message.
Yeah.
I guess I'm really uncomfortable with, yeah, again, personal freedom seems, you know, I guess I'm just uncomfortable.
And the
with-
shame zone, the
I-
shame
The
corner.
shame zone, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we may be at an impasse, I don't know.
Or a third option
Yes.
could be, a third option could be, you know, I applaud you as a group for having this discussion, you know, so if it's important for you to try in one area, maybe you just start first with the beach and you see how that goes. I mean, that's how we got to this point, we're just kind of peeling the onion and kind of seeing what happens.
I like that.
And that's really,
Part of
I,
the progress.
you know, if any of you all have other comments that you'd like to share, but the area that we hear about it the most, that's consistent and vocal, is the beach. And in particular, the concern that Surf Rider has raised with the amount of cigarette butts that are placed in a different area. Maybe we see if a designated area makes a difference, you know?
That makes a lot of sense, and if we can do that practically and administratively, then I think I would feel very comfortable with that, and I think it addresses the need in a reasonable way.
Yeah, I agree. I like that
Yeah,
solution.
I think, well done, Rebecca.
Yay!
Third time's a charm.
No, it really helps to be sort of, we always have somebody that's just listening to the conversation,
Well, it's
because
hard
when
to
you're
go
in it.
from 0 to 100.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, you know, what it does, I think it would create some opportunity to highlight, we could still do the educational campaign.
Yes.
We could still do all of those things.
Yeah.
And still be moving the needle to say, okay, let's do a look back. And we do a look back every year with Surf Atwater. You know, yeah, that's the name of the event. I forget the name of the crossing.
Surf Rider.
Surf Rider.
Mhm.
Surf, the vendor. Eric. But, you know, we do a look back every year, and we sit down and we say, what went well, what didn't go well, where could we improve? And this was a result of that conversation, so.
And I like it a lot as well because we can also mention that we are considering potentially moving in the future, you know, of looking at parks in other areas, right? So this is a good, how do you call it? Intermediary step, yeah. Okay. We have
So if there's a
15 minutes
motion
for
to
two
that
other.
effect, that would be great.
So moved. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say that works, that works.
Yeah,
I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So we'll be.
To, just,
Install the
yeah, the beach, have the one area on the beach for now.
Okay, but the rule will be the smoke-free beach with a designated area.
Correct, right. And the information and the education and everything else that you mentioned.
And to Director Christensen's point, we would come back to the board with an ordinance that would accommodate for that.
Was that mentioned in the ordinance that you stated previously, the beach itself? Or was that just parkland?
It just says excluding parkland, so I don't know from the legal perspective. if that's-
Okay.
Right, so so staff will go back and kind of
Clean it
look
up
to make it all
regardless.
consistent.
Okay.
And I think a sign that says, you know, the signage we can put some consideration into that, and I think saying this is a smoke-free beach, please use receptacle. If that's not too contradictory, you know, it gives the message that you want, yeah, so.
Okay.
Well done. Thank you so much. And, you know, any feedback that, if you want to go back to, I'm not going to direct you to do this, but if it's manageable, to go back to the groups that you talked to and say that this was our suggestion and any feedback, I would really appreciate it. So, all right, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you both for your time.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So moving on,
Can I interrupt for a second?
what?
Can I interrupt?
Yes.
Since we have 10 minutes, 12 minutes before we have our committee as a whole, are either of these more time sensitive than the other?
They go together.
Okay, all right.
I mean, you can almost treat 2 and 3 as the same.
So it's succinct, sorry.
So, yes, so item 2 is consider ordinance 3004, repealing and replacing chapter 462, street festivals and block parties. So, at first, when I was reading this, I got confused.
I did too.
Because we had so many meetings around things, but then I remembered, what we talked about was the policy, and what this is the ordinance, which is not as detailed. Am I right?
That's correct.
I'm
And-
so
and-
proud of myself.
And Attorney Bear provided some language to add to this, which I think the previous ordinance did not include block parties, and now it
Right.
does. So
Right.
that's kind of the major change here.
And, right, so this is really like a housekeeping cleanup a little bit.
For the ordinances,
Yes.
yeah, I know
The
the
policy
policy will
was-
get probably more discussion or at the
Well,
board
we've
level.
made a lot of
But you,
progress.
I know you've already talked about that as a committee.
Right.
Yeah.
So, so hopefully that provides some clarity. And what I noticed in the language, isn't this the one that kept saying premises, it adds premises or something like that? Which I didn't know if that was significant, something was highlighted yellow, maybe that's the one. Anyway, I'll open it up for discussion.
So I'm trying to go through and see if I have any questions on it.
Sure, take your time, but not too much, no.
But within the next 9 minutes.
Right.
Um,
So page 40, it looks like in the packet, these are two are reversed. So if you're looking at the street festivals, this starts on page 40.
So this is just high-level implementation of the policy to be sent to the board levels.
Correct. For ordinance.
Right, and then the policy just gives staff direction to proceed with applications and what springs forward, et cetera.
So at this point, you know, talking with Sarah, she feels that she has everything pretty much together now, that if you're ready to take this, you know, policy discussion to board level, she has the materials to do so. One of the reasons why we're doing street festival and the park permit together is because the fee Sarah and I set up together is to be the same. Because there's going to be some events that used to apply for the special event permit that will now be applying for the park permit.
Right.
Perfect example is the Shorewood Men's Club Barbecue. And so we want to make sure that those are kind of uniform because we didn't want a financial impact for those events.
And the only reason why they would, the groups that were listed as being eligible or needing a park permit are all groups that are gathering and hosting an event and selling things or having some type of.
Correct.
event or whatever.
Selling is the big
So Tammy's
thing.
birthday would not.
Correct.
Very
That-
important.
Selling is the big.
55 people at that
Selling
point.
is the big thing. The other thing would be if it requires village staff time.
And we need a permit.
That would be another, yes.
But otherwise, gatherings, large family gatherings, friends, or even people that are unrelated, as long as they're not selling anything and needing staff time, they don't need a permit.
That's correct.
And that addresses that concern.
That's correct.
So essentially, the kind of the parks ordinance just encompasses all the parks, you know, the public premises and public streets, encompasses the public premises and public streets, so we're clean there. Two different tracks, that's very clear what goes on what.
Correct. And just so you know, the Parks Commission already reviewed ordinance 3009 and made the recommendation for the board to consider. So I just want to, we already had one volunteer committee review that one.
Did they request any changes to that are reflected in here, or is it?
No changes. The one thing they contemplated was if they wanted a reduced rate for residency, but they decided not to go that direction.
Okay.
And so this is, yeah, this is something that's been up and down. Like I know that I'm relatively new to this committee, but this is something that's been up and down for a while, right? This is.
The street festival and block parties or the special event permit or the
Both.
park? Both, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I brought the park one a few years ago. I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago, because we had a request from the Lake Surf Effect. So we wanted something that we could give them a response to. But now we have a little bit more research and we were able to get some input from the Parks Commission. So the big thing with that one is that we're increasing the fee a little bit. Also know that if a group comes, I mean, all permit applications would then come to the board for approval. And if the board felt it was appropriate to waive the fee, you still have that right to do so. So I know I talked to the few members of our service clubs, because I reached out to them to let them know, you know, that these would be on the agenda. And that was one of the things that they talked about, was especially some utilize village staff. And so very similar to what we've done with other applications, we say, you know, we charge on a per hourly basis. But if for some reason the board felt like you wanted to waive that, you would still have that right to do so. So that's what I communicated to them.
Additional comments? Does anyone want to make a motion?
What's the,
I recommend approval of ordinance 3004, repealing and replacing chapter 462, street festivals of the Shorewood Municipal Code, and renaming it special events and residential block parties on a public way or public premises.
second that?
All those in favor, any discussion?
Well, can we just rub 3 in while we're at it?
Well, I just put the motion up there, so.
Okay.
All
All right.
all those in favor?
Amend it.
Aye. Okay. Let's go to number 3.
So moved.
So, okay, second. We don't have to rush it. So, let's, item number 3, consider 3009, amending chapter 400 Parks and Recreation, and resolution 2020-02, amending the village fee schedule for park and beach permits. Any further discussion on that? Did we sort of cover that?
Can you read the whole thing, please?
No.
All right.
Trustee
Second.
Warren?
I don't have anything.
Oh, okay, great. So motion so moved, second, by trustee Warren. All those in favor? Aye. Passes.
Yay.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Good
Thanks.
job. 6 minutes to spare.
Right, very impressive,
Wow.
very impressive.
So Stephanie, welcome. Have you
Hi,
guys?
Stephanie.
Hi.